Thank you for joining us. So today we are with Hope Morris. She is a professor of speech and language pathology at the University of Southern California. And she has a master's degree in speech and language pathology. And Hope enjoys working with autistic children and their families. So thank you so much for joining us today, Hope.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You're in LA right now?
I am in LA right now.
So is Rena.
Yes.
Oh. Well, then you understand the traffic.
Actually, you'll probably be shocked. Everybody's shocked when I say this. I do not drive out here.
Oh.
See?
Well, that's excellent.
Your response was less exaggerated than some I've seen. Because my neighborhood is very walkable, and I also do my work is remote, so I'm very fortunate in that regard.
Wonderful. Yes,
but yeah, but I'll walk like a couple miles to go somewhere, and people will look at me like, "Oh."
You know, I moved here from Vermont, and everything. I lived right in town and worked in town, and it was so nice that everything was walkable. And I rarely drove, so it's been a big shift to driving, kind of everywhere, almost everywhere. So
yeah, I drive everywhere. Well, I live out in Williston, so right. I mean, if well, also bringing Luke would be a real big problem if we were walking.
Oh yeah,
yes.
His little legs get tired.
Oh, Luke.
Yeah, he just had his last day at SD today.
Really?
Yeah, he's starting kindergarten in the fall.
I cannot believe it.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Exciting.
Rena, I don't know if you know, I think I told you, but Hope was one of the first people we talked with when Luke got diagnosed, or before he got diagnosed, actually, with autism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she actually came over to our house, which we were very surprised about having somebody, like what was your position at UVM at the time?
I was a full professor there, but was on some grants that allowed me to do some work in the community and provide some direct support in the community. So it was great.
So you two didn't know each other. You met because
of Luke,
of the work that you were doing.
Yeah.
Nice.
We're just such great people. We just immediately liked each other.
Yes, absolutely.
Clicked.
We did.
Yeah, for sure. It was wonderful. Yeah. So then she came to the house and observed Luke, and then we brought him to UVM to get diagnosed. And then she said to go to school and SD, which is like it's kind of like not public. It's private school that does work with children with autism. And I remember you saying do both, but then that was right when COVID happened.
Yes.
So we chose to pick one. We picked SD. And here's something that happened with them to tell anybody out there that has a child with autism and you want them to get into have speech therapy, make sure wherever they are has speech therapy, because SD did not have an SLP. Mm-hmm. And I did not even know that until my friend who works with special needs children in Florida said, "What does SLP say?" And I'm like, I don't really know. And then so now he's going to be going to kindergarten in the fall. So that's how we know each other pretty much. I had to I'll do more. I have to tell you more about Luke, I'm sure. But go on, Rena. Sorry. This is what happens. This is what I do.
It's impressive that you've stayed in touch. So what's the timeline on that, right? Like, Hope, so you were obviously in Vermont, now you're in California. Mm. So what happened there?
Well, I think Luke was not even 2 when we started to work together, Jayson. Is that correct?
About 2, just about 2 and like a month or so.
Right. Around 2 years old,
really
24
close,
months. And So, we work together through the diagnosis process and through the support program that allows me to help teach parents strategies to support social communication with their children who are struggling to communicate. And so that's kind of when things started. And then I moved at the end of semester, December of 2019, out to LA. But we continue to stay in touch and connect around supports,
Yeah, me and Krista, my wife, took the class More Than Words. And basically it was to teach parents what to do, because parents have, I feel like parents have this natural instinct to do everything for their child, and one of the things you learn is to let them have a little bit of discomfort, and like maybe you'll tell me, or maybe you'll communicate to me, or to wait. I can't remember all the acronyms, but OWL was one of them.
Yes.
Which I can't remember what. Oh, wasn't it out of order? Wasn't it not? It was OWL, but it was like wait, observe, listen, or wait. What was it?
You're right. Observe, wait, and listen.
Okay, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't out of order. Okay. That was the hardest one for me. Waiting for him to do things, because I want to get things done. I want to go. So instead of putting his jacket on and zipping it up, you help him and give little bits of it along the way. And yeah, sorry. This is going to be a lot of me talking to Hope, I bet.
No, that's okay. Yeah, those are some of the most important strategies, because I think autistic children have a lot of capabilities. We have to let them show them. I think it's one of the most important parts. It's how they learn how to communicate their own needs and to initiate those things. And so there's a lot of focus in the program that I've taught for parents. So
yeah, so I actually grew up with a brother on the autism spectrum, so I'm pretty familiar, but I feel like things have changed drastically, probably from then and now. So I'm kind of curious, how have you observed changes in the way that autism is discussed and the way that it's approached and all of that?
Well, I've been in the field now for 23 years, and I've seen significant changes, I have to say. I mean, you probably hear that I refer to autistic children or autistics or autistic adults. And that is really coming from this surge in the neurodiversity movement that's going on and has been going on for and coming to the forefront in the past 5 to 8 years, I'd say. And adults, because there's so much more awareness of autism and the more and more supports for people with autism, I think that autistic adults are able to tell us what it was like growing up, what helped them, what didn't help them, how they want to be viewed, what they want to be called, And so in my field, there was such a focus on first person language. So we would focus on, a child with autism. And the feedback we're getting more and more from self-advocates, people with autism, is that I'm autistic. I want to be called autistic. I was diagnosed with Asperger's. I still want to be called, I have Asperger's. So I think there's just been this really amazing movement to kind of push us forward to, instead of viewing deficit, and even in my field, even though the way a speech pathologist looks at a child is we find their strengths and their weaknesses, right? And then we try to remediate those weak spots in language and communication. We talk about it more now as what are the supports that we need to put into place so that they can have control over their communication and their world, right? And we utilize strengths to support social communication. So it's a really different view. We've moved away from this kind of deficit model. I think the challenge is that when you're doing assessments and you're going through the process of getting the diagnosis, insurance companies, school systems, all of the entities are going to see things a little bit more like a deficit, and we have to document deficits. And I think that's the challenge for parents, especially for parents of very young children.
Yeah, one of the things I also liked about I don't know, did you design the class More Than Words, or were you part of it? Obviously,
the class is designed by a group, the Hannon Group, that's out of Toronto, but I went through extensive training to be able to provide the program. So I'm a certified Hannon speech language pathologist, and it's only speech pathologists that can run those programs. So.
Oh, okay. One of my favorite things actually in the class was when you tried to let the adults see what it would be like kind of to be autistic. And first of all, I'm terrible at spelling, so it was already a rough one, but you said, everybody, here's a piece of paper and a pen. And then one of you went to the back of the room and started flicking the lights on and off. Another person, I believe, put on the song Enter Sandman really loud. And then you started rattling off words faster than we could possibly spell them, which and it was so disorienting. And you're like, and that's an idea or at least one of the flavors of what autism is like. That's why they stim, and that's why they, look out for, the stimulus is too much and stuff. So I thought that was really helpful to me because it gave me perspective.
Yeah, I think, even though that activity is kind of an exaggerated activity, it may not be that exaggerated for some autistic individuals.
Right.
The level of sensory overload and how that, and we've been learning more and more and more about that. And it's such a crucial piece for all support personnel, teachers, any professionals that are working with autistic individuals to understand and to gain themselves, because it explains a lot of what we consider unusual behaviors sometimes, or I'm overwhelmed and so I can't communicate right now. And I think, Jayson, that I'm so glad that that's a hard thing to go through, but it does give you some sense of what overload may feel like for your child.
It's really interesting. So I've done I've done health and wellness and mental health writing for years now, and I've done a lot on these subjects. And this is the first time that I've heard of an exercise like what Jayson is describing. And I can imagine it's so helpful for people that just would have no point of reference for how somebody might feel.
And it is a spectrum, so it could be a lot more worse than that, or it could be a lot better than that. So, like Luke actually isn't like that. He's very attention seeking, I believe, if I'm using the right term. He loves to touch things, loves like bright blinky lights. He loves sound. He listens to music. He loves when I sing to him. He loves shows, like everything. And a lot of times when I pick him up, there are children that I see that they don't like anything, and that's where I feel like I was very fortunate, and my heart breaks when I see parents having to deal with that, because I don't know where I would find the strength. So it just makes me just want to I don't know, give them some kind of energy or something, and I'm sure it's different because it's your child, you're gonna love them and stuff, but it's amazing, some parents, what they go through and the strength that they have for helping their child. I mean, I got lucky. Luke is just an absolute angel and is never in a bad mood, and that's very fortunate.
Yes, that's wonderful. He is a sweetheart, definitely a sweetheart. And individuals on autistic individuals, all of these kind of sensory things can vary day to day, just kind of the way they do for us. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do that are either sensory seeking or to eliminate it. You know, when I first get up in the morning, I can't have loud sounds, loud noises. I've got to kind of acclimate to getting up and awake. If I'm sitting in a lecture and it's going on and on, I'm getting bored, I might tap my foot, I might do these things that kind of help me regulate my body. And so some of the things that autistic individuals are doing are ways that they figured out, just like we figure out how to regulate information. For some individuals, that's going to change hour to hour, day to day, in certain situations, you know, depending on what those challenges are. But, and, you know, for Luke, for example, it's more the sensory seeking. He needs a lot of input, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, once we know that for a specific individual or child, we can provide them those things that give him that sense, gets the sensory seeking piece met. And the more he gets his sensory needs met, the more regulated and the more ready to learn and to process information that he is. So it's a key piece of what we all do.
Yeah, I feel like the key thing is to excite whatever it is they're attracted to, and implement rewards based on that, and then use other techniques to guide the child to learn things that are a little more mainstream, so that they can function as best as possible without losing themselves. That was said pretty well, wasn't it?
That was, Jayson, that was exactly. And I would say that it was great. I mean, it was absolutely what you hear a lot of autistic adults say. You know, they are viewing their life as needing support, but not fixing them, because there's something wrong with them. And we don't want to change people. And in the history of the work that we've done, and even over my time as a clinician, I look back now and I think, wow, I can't believe I was doing some of those things, because I have such a better perspective of what that's like hearing from autistic adults now.
So I can tell you from just my experience, my brother's an adult now. Whatever was done back then seems to have done a huge amount of harm, because everything was deficit focused. And so you could still has internalized that. And, you know, and I think because he internalized that so young, because that's how everything was done. And it's hard for him to kind of get out of that shift. And he really does not like the label autism at all, and is like vehemently against it. And he's got a friend who's also on the spectrum who feels the same way. And I suspect it's because of the way things were done back then, you know, that they're just so averse to it. And it's really, it's sad, because like I look at kids and like, I'm glad that they're getting much better support. But yeah, you can really see, to me, I feel like it's apparent that all of the deficits in the understanding, you know, then led to telling people, you know, that they had those deficits. So it's nice to see things progress in a much better way. So I feel like it's better to be an autistic kid today than it was like 30 years ago, you know, or so.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And, you know, we're much more aware now that the impact that has on development of self-esteem, mental health, which is a significant challenge for many autistic individuals. And it does make me realize that, you know, if the message that's been sent all of those years at a young age is you have deficits, then how do you view yourself and your capability? And then I could go this step further and understand why you might want to not be associated with a label, right? Makes a lot of sense to me.
That's totally true. I was put into all the special classes when I was in school, learning disability. ADHD didn't exist yet, really, or they didn't know what it was. So I was put in all these special classes, like the whatever resource room and all kinds of stuff like that.
Mhm.
And they kind of write you off too. They go, well, we know what you're capable of, so let's just get you through. And they actually ended up graduating me, and I had a 1.6 grade point average, which I personally think you should keep a kid back until he does better. But they were just like, out the door, good luck. And then I did really good in college because the way I am is if I'm interested, I'm really good at it. But if I'm not, I just don't care, which is bad for the way school is. Well, I don't know about today, but then.
And that's not uncommon for many autistic individuals. Many will do much better at the college level because then they're more focused on interests, things that are motivating, but things that they're not motivated by, and we kind of all work that way. That's not unusual or different, I think. I chose to go into what I went into, and I was very interested in disability from a young age because my older brother has learning disability. And I watched him struggle. I watched him placed into remedial classes. This was before IDEA that protected and provided special education. He was put in remedial classes with kids that were not learning disabled, but had other kinds of issues. And they were, even at the young age of by third grade, they were doing social promotion. So he hadn't even achieved third grade level work, and they were going to promote him in fourth grade. My parents kind of had to pull him out of the public school and put him in a private school and get him caught up, because exactly that, Jayson, he wasn't ready. And I watched him struggle, lots of tutoring, and he's made his way, and he's extremely successful, and he has a master's degree and is doing really, really, really well. But the struggles and the social challenges and the bullying and all of the things that happened to him as a child, and how he was treated through the system, was such a push for me, and with my interest with disability and supporting those who have challenges, came from a personal experience.
Yeah. Wow. That's great that he's doing so well. That's wonderful. Yeah, they should probably change something in the public system a little bit. Like, hey, you know what? We have a different course for this person, a different avenue, not just push them through.
Right.
Yeah. And I know so many stories, Jayson, that are not unlike yours, where either somebody was left behind or pushed through, or just something with the public school system. It's clearly not meeting people's needs the way it needs to be. And my guess, based on everything that's going on now, is that it has not gotten any better. I mean, I don't really know anybody actively with people in the public school system, but what I can see from the news and the state of teachers leaving, my guess would be that it's probably not getting any better.
I think it depends on the state too.
Yep.
Like in Vermont, Luke was assigned a 1-to-1 for ever. He's going to have a 1-to-1 person through his school career. Whereas my friend in Florida, who's a teacher, is like, do not bring Luke to Florida. Just don't. And so, I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it too, depending on where you live.
I agree.
Yeah, good point.
I agree so much. Since I've moved here to Los Angeles, some of the things that I saw in Vermont that were so supportive are so much harder to access here. And families, no matter that, the fact that an individualized education plan is a legal document, there are federal laws around special education, families are still fighting to get their children what is truly needed for them. And I think the struggle is that a lot of this comes down to socioeconomic status, where people living in more affluent areas with more income that goes into the schools, and the public schools may have access to all of these things, and other areas don't. This is the same thing that I saw when I lived in Baltimore City. And then what happens is a lot of families who have the means move to the areas where there's more supports, right? And then all of the funding goes with them. So it is a challenging situation, I think, for families. And it goes state by state and county by county, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So you just said Baltimore, which is very strange. That's where I'm from.
Oh, really?
Originally. So you've lived both where Jayson is now and where I'm from and where I am now. It's funny how that works. So
oh, that's great. Yeah, I
were
lived
you there temporarily, or?
I lived in the Annapolis area for about 6-7 years, and then Baltimore another 5 years.
Okay.
So my first position as a speech language pathologist out of school, because I went to Towson University,
which is where I went, which is really funny.
Okay.
Very funny.
Your soccer.
It's a very small world. Crazy. So I did my graduate work at Towson University, and I went to work at Kennedy Krieger Institute, which is a part of Johns Hopkins, and I worked there for 9 years. 8 of those was at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. So that's where I really gained my training and knowledge and all of my interest in working with autistic individuals and their families. So.
What are your thoughts on getting a genetic test to see if there's a genetic reason for autism? Do you think it's necessary? Does it help? Or is it just like people trying to blame each other? That's what I feel like it is sometimes. It's your fault he has autism.
Really?
I've dealt with it.
Yeah. Oh. Well, there are a couple reasons. The American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend that genetic testing be completed. And the reasoning for that is kind of twofold. One, there are certain identifiable genetic disorders that can result in having autism and or other challenges. And so if there's something identifiable, it's good to know that. The likelihood of genetic testing showing something specific is fairly low, but it happens. And then the other reason for it is really for parents. If they are doing family planning, if they know they have some identifiable genetic condition that could be passed on, they can make decisions themselves about, whether they want to have another child, if they're totally accepting and looking at autism as this is just who we are, this is neurodiversity, that's great. But it's just information for families, really.
Are there some of the questions that came up in our house was Krista had a really rough labor, like a really rough one. She asked, she wanted to get a C-section like from the beginning because she had Mila before and Mila got stuck. And then but UVM is very against that. They push for no, we're having a vaginal birth. There's no, and we'll deal with that when it happens. And she kept saying, no, he's bigger than she was, so he's gonna get stuck, and he did. And I've only seen one birth in my life, and his head was like this long, and they had to put him on a table and resuscitate him, and he was in the ICU for like just the night. And so between that and me probably being on the spectrum, and also prescription drugs, she had a prescription for something that was like that may not be good, all those different things. Parents and want to know what it is, would you say that can happen through a rough birth? Can you get autism through a rough childbirth? I mean, it seems weird to me that would be it, because you're like, everything's fine, and then bam, autism. It doesn't make sense to me. But
right. Well, clearly this is out of my scope. I'm not a medical doctor, but there are some children that have a complicated birth. More so, I've noticed it in children who are truly preterm. that may also have autism as a part of their challenges. But just because what you described happened, there are many children that have these kind of experiences at birth that don't have any resulting challenges at all. So
Right.
it's really difficult to kind of identify a very specific, like what part of all of those pieces are they responsible at all? It's very hard to know.
I know what you're talking about though, Jayson, because in my house, the narrative was, oh, well, your mother got the flu when she had it.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference between, because there's three of us. And so, and one is on the spectrum and the others are not. But then the theory was also, your father's probably on the spectrum too. So, which I feel like that theory is probably more sound than the flu theory. But yeah, I feel like people just do speculate because they don't really, I think, still know enough to really know what the causes are.
And I can understand that feeling of like, I want to be able to pinpoint what was the cause. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge in talking to families when we make a diagnosis is we don't have all the answers, right? One preterm child has autism, one other preterm child doesn't have autism. Why is that, right? So it's just this kind of complicated, I think, combination of possibly some genetic pieces. They're showing more and more some environmental pieces that may be a part of it, maybe some autoimmune challenges that could be part of it. And that creates these changes in the brain, right? And development. It's interesting. There's a group, Zayden and their colleagues. This was a recent meta-analysis from 2022. I was just reading the other day, and they had done a study in 2012 looking at prevalence rates of globally for autism, and they wanted to do an update. So since 2012, there has continued to be an increase in the prevalence of autism. But what they're kind of finding is there are multiple factors around why that is. Some of it is just the increase in awareness that continues. People are more aware of autism. And I'm hoping that people are more aware about the neurodiversity movement with that. There's been a greater response for autism and knowledge through just public health globally. We're a little bit better at identifying cases and defining autism. And I think that moving from these discrete, pervasive developmental disorder and Asperger's and autism, the way we used to diagnose, and we have this umbrella term, autism spectrum, may have kind of actually helped that. And I think the other factor really is just in the access to more services and supports within the community. Even though there's still challenges, I'm not saying it's perfect, definitely more capacity with community provision of services and supports, probably much more now, Rena, than were available for when your brother was a child. So.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that if I were to give parents in general advice is not to think of it as something to figure out the cause and not to try to figure out a way to correct or fix anything, and to get rid of expectations and just love the child and give them support for anything that they need, and always be working on the puzzle that's there, but not to fix it. The puzzle is about how can I help the child be more comfortable and happy so that they blossom more, like that's what it feels like I don't care about the DNA tests because I don't care what caused it. I just don't care. I don't have a time machine. I don't have any kind of weird ray gun that can change anything. So I'm all about forward. And if Luke goes through life and he ends up not being able to speak, then that's Luke. That's all there is to it. If he does, then that's Luke. I don't I think it's almost like a grieving thing. You have to give up your expectations of what you thought it was like to have a child and realize you have this one, and this one is wonderful.
That's such a good point. I think you're right. It's people's expectations that they put into it, and when that experience doesn't meet it. But yeah, I think I try, when I talk to my brother, I try to change that narrative. I'm like, well, you just have to find your way. Like, no, don't say you can't do this. I was like, you know how to ask for help. So I'm like, ask for help and find your way of doing the thing that you want to do. But it's much harder at the adult level when you're fighting all of that narrative that was deeply ingrained as a kid. So it's really great that your son is not getting any of that narrative, Jayson.
Oh yeah, and it's also in movies. I mean, I can think of 5 movies that have autistic children in them, whereas every other movie that all children are neurotypical. So we grow up watching. That's what a mom does. That's what a dad does. That's what children are like. So like, you have thoughts of someday I'm going to teach my kid how to ride a bike, and that might end up happening, but it may not end up happening. So you feel like you've lost something because of that. And really, it's not about you. You're the adult. It's not about you. It's about them. What do they want to do? How can they prosper? And that was the thing that I had to come to terms with pretty quickly too, actually, because I'm kind of an accepting person.
Jayson, this is exactly why I always tell parents they are the expert on their child. I'm here to support you. What are your thoughts and feelings based on what you know about your child? Because pretty much when I do that, parents and grandparents and other important family members really do know much more about their communication style, what they need, what they want, all of those things. So, your statement really is just such a demonstration of how you are, an expert about Luke. The one thing I am going to say is that we do know that some percentage of autistic individuals may not verbally speak or not be able to functionally communicate that way. But speaking and communication are totally different. And there are many other ways that we can help support communication for autistic individuals that may have what I consider motor components to their speech issues that make it so that they can't use this as a mode of speaking. There are many different systems, many of them, some of them very high tech, some of them low tech, that can really help support the communication piece, whether it's verbally speaking or not.
Yeah. Luke said daddy the other day.
Oh my gosh.
And he's been saying dad, 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 daddy for a really long time. But the other day he went to bed and I noticed that he didn't poop. And so I was on guard. By the way, they should come out with a methane detector that you can put in someone's room. Because if they're sleeping and you don't know, then they're going to sit in it, and that's just awful. But anyway, he did sit in it. And when he woke up in the morning, he was crying and screaming, and I was like, oh no. And I opened the door, and he was standing with his legs like really spread wide open, and I was just about to cry, and he just goes, daddy, daddy, daddy. And I was like, whoa. So I mean, like over and over and over and over. And then when I was changing him, it was hurt. So he kept saying it, like pleading with me. And I was like, oh, how do we work this into your your routine? But you can't, so obviously I'm not going to torture him to get him to say daddy. So like, how do you use that? You know what I mean? Like, I guess, give him more challenges and not just give him everything he wants, because obviously that turmoil is what made him do it.
Yeah, that was a level of distress. Right?
Yeah,
that kind of the emotion helped pull that out. And I think that that point, we just continue to use the term daddy when you speak about yourself, when you're talking to him, so that he continues to get the model. But it may require a lot of emotion for him to pull out language. And here's the other thing I always say about autistic children and autistic individuals. I presume competence, always, because I don't know. We don't know enough about why some kids take so much longer to talk, and all of a sudden they start talking. Some adults may be able to tell you a little bit more, but may not always. There was something that just kept it inside. And so just because a child is not talking on time, or even maybe a pretty long time down the road, I know of kids with autism at 10 or 11 or 12 start talking. And we think that they may need a system. And we use systems, these kind of what we call augmentative and alternative communication systems, to help bridge that so they can get their needs met and communicate and not be so frustrated while we're working on building the ability to do it this way with verbal speech. So, but if there's anything I can say to anyone who works with autistics, who especially is in the profession and any kind of therapy role or teacher, is presume competence. There's so much more in there than we don't always see.
Yeah, and get out of routines. I think I'm not that they don't need their routines, but I like to challenge Luke a lot. Like he has like, I have like 4 iPads over the years that are various levels of technology. They're, a 2, a 3, and a 4, and 5. But I have them all set to the same thing, and I put on YouTube, and I gave him a YouTube subscription, his own channel, so that I could tailor it around him. So what I'll do is I'll go upstairs and I'll put one on Dory, one on Nemo, one on Lion King, and one on like Monsters Inc. And I'll put them in separate rooms. And the first time I ever did that, he didn't understand the idea of finding something. It seemed he just was like, just in the hallway, like what? So I brought him to them. Now he'll not go. He'll pull up, like he'll pull over something. He goes right to the spot and immediately finds things, and he knows exactly how to move stuff over. And actually, now he can use iPads better than most adults. It's amazing.
I bet he can.
But yeah, challenge them. Don't just assume that you can. Don't just assume you have to do everything for them. Don't just give them things. Let them be a little upset about that they didn't get their watermelon yet, and let them point. Let them go over and try to get it from you. Anything really. Just it's like rock star syndrome, I call it. If you just do everything for a person, they don't ever have to do anything. They don't have to worry about anything. So I try to challenge them a lot with puzzles. Like, where's that noise coming from? That's fun.
Yeah, those are really, and that's a really good point, is, when I presume competence as a clinician myself, I'm always trying to figure out where that sweet spot is of like just enough challenge and being able to tolerate a little frustration versus that was too much and now I'm so overwhelmed I can't continue. And so finding that little sweet spot, but absolutely challenging them, because we won't know what individuals are capable of unless they have a challenge, right? We just don't know. And I can't tell you how many times I've been absolutely shocked by individuals that I've worked with and their capability. And that's what has really taught me to presume competence until I know, okay, this is something that may be more challenging. Let's work on this when it comes to communication.
Yeah. We have a lot of different people have a lot of ways of learning and a lot of ways. And like, that's why sometimes I'll speak out loud, because when you hear with your ears, it's different than thinking about it. A different part of your brain is being activated. And that's why I like to try to go with all the senses, as much as I can, because you don't know which one is going to be the one that's really that really helps them interact. It could be smell. You just don't know.
Mhm.
So I'm always messing with him. He actually gives me a side eye often when I do something a little mischievous. He'll fix whatever I did and then go. It's really funny.
I love that. I love that. You're just like, I know you can like almost see the wheels turning like, hey, what
Yeah,
are you
you did
doing?
that. I told you I don't want Nemo on.
Love it. And I mean, as a professor and the work that I do, there's been a real push, and I think a lot of this has to do with, we all learn differently. And there are lots of things that we can do just in teaching in general, and what they refer to as universal design for learning, which makes it better for everyone, not just for someone who has a challenge, right? And really thinking about providing education and assessing student knowledge in various formats that are going to be the best way for that student to show what they know. Because that's really what we're looking for. Have they gotten it? Do they understand? And how are they going to show that? And so that's been really good for me to get more training and knowledge and work in. And when I'm teaching, I'm teaching at the graduate level, I think about it that way, because we have individuals that are in our program that have their own learning challenges and have accommodations. And so I do things for the whole class that benefits everybody, but definitely supports that person who may have more learning issues. So
I'll try not to hog hope up. You can talk.
So I do have one from our question list actually that I'm curious about, and probably viewers will be too. So have you seen any of these recent portrayals of autism in the media? So there's like Amy Schumer has a show that's called Life and Beth, and that alludes to her love interest having autism, and she's been very outspoken. Her husband in real life is autistic.
Yeah.
And then there's also like that reality type show that's Love on the Spectrum, which is that. So have you seen any of these, and what are your thoughts on these?
I haven't seen, was it Life of Beth or
Life and Beth?
Life and Beth. I love Amy Schumer, but I haven't seen that. And I do know she's been very open about her autistic husband, which I think just seems to fit with her personality. But I have seen Love on the Spectrum. What I do see is important is, especially about Love on the Spectrum, is that when you really watch that show, the challenges in dating, relationships, sexuality, all of those things that these individuals in the show, these autistic individuals, are dealing with are the exact same things that other neurodiverse group of people, or what is referred to as neurotypical, are dealing with. And I think that kind of levels things a little bit. I'm hoping for people to see that and to understand that autistic people, are looking for the same things in life that we all are: to connect, to have relationships, to date, to get married if they want to decide, maybe I don't know, maybe I am transgender. Maybe I am a part of the LGBTQ community, which we do see based on some of the more recent evidence that's often common, figuring out my sexuality like everybody else is doing, and that they want to be contributing members of society and have, employment that gives them satisfaction. These are all things that are not atypical for any other person. And I'm hoping that that helps people see that in that show. But I do also see that, and I also see that it does help portray some of the significant challenges. Sometimes being on a date is just overwhelming, or talking a lot and having a conversation can be challenging, or, you know, and that each person is different, just like we all are. And when you see the interactions on that show, you do see how different everybody is, you know, and what their own challenges may be. With that said, you know, I think there's in the self-advocate community, there's some mixed feelings about, especially love on the spectrum, and I understand that it's not everybody's cup of tea. And I think what I've seen more of, and I'm interested in seeing more of, is autistic actors portraying autistics.
Yeah.
Then moving to autistic actors just acting and not having to portray an autistic character.
Yeah.
Right. That's where we're really, I feel like, moving towards, and that the opportunities should be there. And there is a strong push in the self-advocate community around autistics should be portrayed by an autistic actor.
Yeah, well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. It has that. Do either of you know if that's ever happened before? If an autistic character has been
Netflix.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called, but
I'm trying to remember it myself.
It's this kid and his sister are like the main characters. And what is that called? Is it neurotypical? It might be called like.
Is it neurodiversity or
God, what's that called? It's like something. It's either typical or atypical or something like that.
Yeah, one is called atypical, but the other one I was thinking about that I've seen recently, and I'm not sure if it's on Netflix, and I thought it was really well done. All of the individuals in the show have autism. They're all autistic actors, and it portrays adults, all autistic, living together with in a not in a, you know, sheltered setting,
right,
in an apartment with support. And I thought it was so well done. And the whole show is autistic actors. It was fabulous. And I'm trying to remember if it was on.
Yeah. Well,
I'd like to know what show that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean.
It's called As We See It. And it's on Prime, Amazon Prime.
Oh, okay. Cool. That's on my list now.
It's about 3 20-somethings. They live in an apartment in LA. So you see lots of LA, of course, LA.
It's like every sitcom trope, only with autistic people. Like,
but the entire cast that are portraying somebody with autism, they all have autism. And that's the first time that I experienced that. And I thought the show was extremely well done and very real.
I wonder if the writers are also autistic. That would be interesting to know who writes for them.
Right. Like who's writing the script and giving the input. And, you know, and that kind of leads me to think, because I am a researcher, that has been the drive, I'd say, over the last 3 to 5 years, is there are organizations that provide funding for research about, you know, autistics, and the requirement to gain funding means that you have to have self-advocates as a part of developing research questions, walking through the research, giving input. What are the things that we need as an autistic community, so that can help drive the type of research that we do to provide supports. So that's another really huge push in the research community.
Wow. When you were talking about earlier about I'm not exactly how to explain what you were talking about, but it sparked this in my head. I've noticed that like I have a 17-year-old daughter, and she pretty much thinks every kind of way to be is super cool. Like like LGBTQ is cool, and autism actually is now cool, it seems. And I think that's great, because now I think that that generation is going to be opening more tolerance, I guess, for lack of a better word, for people being different, and being still accepted into society. I mean, it seems like my generation was kind of in the middle. My dad's generation was they were lunatics, but but like my generation's like, we're not sure what to do with all this, and then like her generation is just like, oh yeah, I have a friend, he's autistic, and like, I mean, I don't know, it's hard I don't know how exactly how to put it. It's just, it's becoming almost like you have to get rid of the negative stereotypes, and get rid of the negative in general. Like, it's just a person, and if you need to know more about them, here's some information, but other than that, we're all different. It's not black and white, it's not male and female, it's a giant spectrum with it's like a milkshake with different ingredients, and everybody is completely different. Nothing is on and off. It's And that's what I think is one of the biggest problems right now with politics on that subject in so many ways, is because you got two teams, and one team is just like, no, there's only two genders, no, you're either smart or dumb, and I find that really annoying, and I really like the new generation that's growing up right now. I like the way they're thinking in that way. They have terrible music though.
I like, and I think you're right, Jayson, because there is more understanding of spectrum across many domains. And, children that are individuals that are like Mila's age have kind of grown up with kids that they go to school with. They're in the same classroom, they're mainstream, they're not in a special classroom, and they're kids that have all kinds of differences. And I think that decreases the stigma, and they are going to have a very different response around autism, because there's some, oh yeah, he has autism. Okay. And, one of the things that I've really had to shift in, especially when I'm working with like adolescents and middle school and adolescents, about social skills and teaching social skills. And, I've really reframed that. And I find out from the kids that I work with, what confuses you the most? What do you want to learn? And often they can tell you, and I can help support them so they understand, because to be honest, we do some really weird social things that don't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to learn them, and we're taught them, and all of these things. And, when I take it from their perspective and their perspective, I'm like, well, this is just one of those things that people do. I know it sounds really weird, doesn't it? I mean, how hyper social we can be. And so I kind of reframed a lot of my work, and I also work so that they have self-confidence, self-esteem, and feel okay about saying, when you say things like that, I don't really get that sometimes. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. I have autism. Can you just tell me what that means? So that they don't feel awkward being able to be honest. But there is a significant onus that's on us, as in whatever we consider more neurotypical, to try to do the work to understand people who have autism, so that the onus isn't always on the autistic individual to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where my kind of leaning is, as I've gone through this journey and thought about autism, is why is it always on them to figure out our peculiarities?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they view it, right? Often, like, I don't know why these people do this. So it's just interesting to think about it from that perspective now.
You just you triggered a memory. So I have a friend who they're an adult at this point, but suspects that they're on the autism spectrum and told me that the way that I communicate, for some reason, they understand my communication style, but not so much other neurotypical people. And I'm now sort of realizing that as I trace it back, it probably had to do with growing up with my brother and having to like adapt, and I think my father probably too, like because you have to be crystal clear and you can't speak the way that a lot of neurotypical people speak, where things are vague, and so sometimes I get in trouble for being like too blunt or too direct.
Yeah.
But it's because I'm like, well, no one's gonna get it, if you don't just tell them the thing. Like, and I only like very recently realized that I'm like, oh wait, I think it has to do with the autism, in my life, like in my
training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You learned to adapt the way you communicate to support your brother because you love him. And that's what we do, right? I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because sometimes I'd be like, you can't say that like that. And, you had to be very, he'd tell the
blunt.
Tell somebody, something. And I'm like, that is so rude. You cannot communicate like that. Like you need to, make a different choice here. Right. But most people will not say that. Like most, or, it's like that is sort of socially out of bounds. Like, whoa. And I'm like, yeah, but if you don't tell somebody, that they're doing something, they're not going to know to shift or adapt. So
I think we should stop having social out of bounds.
Hey, well, Jayson, you would be the person to say that. Love that. That just also made me think about, Rena, what you just said, that, that because you made adaptations so that you're pretty explicit, which can be perceived as blunt.
Yeah, I get in trouble in the corporate workplace.
But other people view that as negative, right?
Yeah.
And it just is like, how can we get to a place where we don't make judgments or misperceive people and their intentions just because they have a very direct way of communication, which people with autism, the autistic people often do. They're blunt. If they think it, they say it. Why do we have to make a judgment about that, about who they are as a person? You know what I mean? That's just, it makes me think that way about it.
I totally agree with you. Because if my brother's, if he says something that's like, is going to be hurtful, then I'll just let him know. I'll be like, hey, what you said that's probably going to be hurtful to somebody. Because I'm like, he might not know. He just might need somebody to say, this is how somebody else might be perceiving your behavior. And then he's very receptive to that.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, but being that direct, and I guess because I've done it for so long, I'm like, oh, well, this makes sense. Why waste time, with dancing around and all of these like fake pleasantries? Like, just say the thing that you mean or the thing that you want.
Yeah,
I hear you.
I think that what you were saying about we should also have the onus to work with trying to help autistic people. I think everyone should be doing that with everyone. And the reason why I say that is because again, Mila, her generation thinks a period is a negative in a text. If I were to say, when are you coming home? Period, with a period, I'm mad. I had no idea. Because they don't use punctuation when they're writing. As a matter of fact, they're so sensitive to text, they have little codes that they put at the end, like /s means sarcastic, /sr means serious. They have a bunch of those. So I had to learn those so that I wasn't like, while Mila was somewhere. I mean, my first thought was, oh my God, chill out, it's a period. But then I thought, well, why don't I just I figured it out. Why don't I just do something about it? I mean, I know what it is. I can do it. And it's kind of the same thing with everything. If you're stuck in your ways and you have the ability to make the change, that, like, for instance, learning someone's name instead of dead naming them. Why not just say the real name, the name they want to? If they want to be called Superfly, call them Superfly. Just calm down. There's no why are you so stubborn with it? And I think if everybody did that, they're not going to. The generation needs to go and die, and the new generation, it's an evolution. It's not, some will change, some won't. But that's all there is to it. If you have the ability to recognize something and change it to make somebody else a little bit happier, just do it. It seems.
Then you're describing a functional world, I guess, where humans respect each other and treat each other with kindness. And I don't have enough faith in humanity that like everybody's going to get there. Like there are obviously really great people that do, but there's people in every generation that are stuck in that negative space.
I guess I should be trying to be tolerant of those people that can't make those changes.
There you go.
That's a tough one.
There you go.
So, when Luke was born and we were waiting for all that stuff to happen, where he was going to first talk, first walk, all that stuff, we found I was brand new to it, so I didn't know. What are some of the things that a person should be looking at, should observe, and then realize they should get their child tested so they can give them the support that they need? I think that would be a good thing to talk about.
Absolutely. Especially for new parents, you're right. You may not have a lot of experience with children and development in general. And so I often find that newer parents may not know. But there's a caveat to that. Parents do know when things are not progressing the way they should, and they start to have a sense that something's not quite there. And the challenge has been is that many parents go to the pediatrician with these concerns, and especially if you're a new parent, it gets waved off as, well, you're a new parent, just give him some time, he'll catch up, blah 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 blah. And so I'm actually gonna look it up. It's the CDC has a really great app that families can use that you can download, and they have a milestone tracker app.
I have that.
I don't know do you use it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that existed. That's pretty cool.
The CDC created one. It's really lovely, and it really goes through all levels of development: motor, cognitive, communication, social, all of those things. And there's been some adjustments within the last year or so around what is considered developmentally appropriate by age. And it's been updated in the app. And so I often ask new parents to download that and just, okay, my child's around this age. Oh, they should be doing this and that. Don't stress out if, there's a range of development, between this many months and this many months, they should be doing X. So, but just to make sure that you're kind of looking and making sure they're on track and knowing what those development milestones look like, what kids should be able to do from birth all the way through toddlerhood. That is one thing that I would highly, highly recommend for families. Some autistic children have what I think is actually going to be delineated as maybe a form of autism, is when they might lose skills. This tends to happen around that 18-month mark, where children may be communicating, may be verbal, saying mama, dada, they may be very interactive. And then all of a sudden, and it seems all of a sudden, it's probably happening a little bit over time, but all of a sudden they're not responding to their name. They're not using words anymore. They're having significant tantrums. They always seem irritable, those kind of things. If that is seen or noticed at any age, especially in that 18-month mark, that is of concern. And all families should then explain this to the pediatrician and get screened and get a full assessment. Because that is something we only see either in children who are autistic or possibly other neurodegenerative kind of, disorders. So it's unusual to see a regression or a loss of skill. That's an indication that there needs to be assessment. The other thing is that the American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend that your child receive screening for autism at the 18-month checkup and the 24-month checkup. And so if that's not being done by your pediatrician, you can request it. One of the screeners, one of the more common ones is called the MCHAT, MCHAT. And that would be something that they should be doing as a part of the well child visits at 18 and 24 months.
Okay, yeah. It's interesting when you said that. So when Luke went in for his evaluation, it was like as if I don't know, how do I put this? What was the thing? What'd you say at the very beginning of that? It was I kind of lost it now. It's my Adderall's worn off. It is. I'll becoming more sporadic. How did you begin that?
We were just talking about making sure that pediatricians sometimes, that parents, even though you may be a new parent, parents kind of know when something's not right, and will often go to the pediatrician and voice concerns.
One of the things that happened with us was people would go, "Has he said anything yet?" And you'd be like, no, because I don't know. I don't know what age they start talking. I'm like, they can talk at 1? What? Like they can talk at 2? I don't know. And so what I would do is I would say, oh, and then you'd start thinking there's a problem. And then somebody else will say, everybody's got this story. I know I have a brother who had a kid and he didn't talk until he was 9 and now he's a lawyer, And so then you brush it off. So like there's 2 ways to go. You can either panic in the beginning, and first of all, there's no reason to panic.
Right.
We're not trying to diagnose some kind of horrible thing. We're trying to get it as early as possible because the brain is developing over time, and it all happens as early as possible. So the quicker you can get a child assessed and then start getting the help, the better it is for them. But don't listen to the people that say, I had a brother that had a son that didn't talk and now he's a lawyer, because there's no harm in getting them screened. It's perfectly fine to go and get a test and get evaluated.
Absolutely. I can't stress enough. It's just a screening. It can be done within your doctor's office. And a screening, because of the nature of a screening, it may capture children who do not have autism on the screening, but there's no harm in getting that ruled out and assessed, because there may be some other challenges, like a little bit of developmental delay in speech and language. And we can go ahead and get them into therapy so that we can get them caught up and get them moving on. So, and the other thing is there's just this zone age-wise of when communication is developing. Children between like birth and 2 years, especially up until 3, their language skills are just growing so quickly. And so if they're behind, we can get in early, we can alleviate some of that frustration in communication. We all know how important communication is, not just for our basic needs, but just for our overall development as a human being. So that is a piece. You're absolutely right, Jayson. Getting in, there's no harm in a screening, no harm in getting them assessed, and there's no harm in getting started early if there is a delay.
Yeah.
So I have, along that same vein, I have another question for you that I think probably listeners will want to know. So say I'm already an adult and I suspect maybe that I'm autistic or might be somewhere on the spectrum, and I'm like, I want to get some resources. I want to find out so that if I can get resources for help, then I can take advantage of that. What would people do? Because I feel like more people have been saying, hey, wait a minute, as more articles and things come out, that sounds like me. So what do you recommend for people in that situation?
It definitely has been an area because there's so much kind of knowledge more, and it's kind of in the media and everything about autism, and maybe that's what my challenge is. And I think for adults, it can be challenging to get the diagnosis. There are not a lot of professionals that are actually trained in how to delineate autism in adults. Often I find that they may be more trained in psychiatry, because the prevalence of some other mental health challenges such as depression and anxiety are much more pronounced sometimes in autistics. I think there's multiple reasons for that. You imagine what we described about what if it's an individual who's having all of these sensory and overwhelm? How can that create anxiety? Is there a genetic predisposition for anxiety? Are there been messages that have been sent over their life that makes them not have the self-esteem and therefore have depression? So, I would say in the adult population, most of the time it's going to be a psychiatrist that might have some training in how to make that diagnosis. There is also a push in a lot of self-advocate circles now about identifying as being on the spectrum, meaning self-identification.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And, it's not for me to judge whether that's appropriate or inappropriate. What I do find is that if you have a professional that's able to help provide that diagnosis, if there are some kind of services that might be able to be provided for you, they sometimes come along a little easier if you have someone who's given a professional. It's kind of a gateway for services. And from what I've heard from a lot of self-advocates who weren't diagnosed until later in life, is getting the diagnosis was overall such a positive thing for them, because it kind of, now you do all that looking back in your life, and it explains that there's something different in the way my brain works, and I'm not flawed, I'm not a bad person, I'm not any of those things that I might have thought in the past, because I didn't know that my brain functioned differently.
So true.
Yeah. So, and I would say also, I think when we look at prevalence rates in autism, there was always the indication 3 or 4 to 1 boys to girls. And what we're finding is that number is really off, because
interesting.
Women.
Can I take a guess?
Yes.
All right.
Please. I'll stop talking.
Because I've thought about this, and I think it's because women are trained differently to act a certain way, and men aren't, and so women, it's harder to find autistic tendencies.
You're really right on track, Jayson.
Oh, nice.
There's definitely a piece, and this is where they talk about the term masking. And what they find is that girls and women are able to, they have a little more, you're right. It's how we train females to be, basically. Be a good girl, do this, play with your friends, play nice, all of these things. Those are messages that are sent right from the environment. But it's also, there seems to be a little bit more of a way for them to mask the challenges they're having that boys are not able to do. And so when we go, and all of the testing that we do, the testing that Luke received was based on samples of children that were mainly boys. It wasn't, we don't have a really good sample of girls. We weren't identifying them. And so you're starting to see more and more women in 40s, 50s going, I finally found out I have autism. I finally get why I don't get it, So it's very interesting. We're learning so much more about how it looks different and represents differently for women and what their specific challenges are.
That's fascinating to me. I
Mhm.
social upbringing definitely can change it, and also I have different cultures in the world too, of
Yeah.
course.
Mhm.
I mean, not every culture is accepting or I mean, I imagine there are cultures where you are forced to stop acting up,
Mhm.
whereas in America often we'll just go, oh, boys will be boys. But yeah, wow, yeah, it's
That's
all
such a good
training.
point. That's such a good point, Jayson. And it's one of the challenges that especially in Vermont, there's a large refugee resettlement program. So there are many new Americans living in Vermont. Surprisingly, most people would
I
find.
didn't know that actually about Vermont. That's interesting.
Yeah. Somali Bantu, Nepalese, people from the Bhutan. And so we were having to learn a lot about how do you consider the cultural aspects, how the culture views disability. Is there even a word in their language for autism? And in many, no.
Hmm.
And then also the assessments that we use are not culturally, they're not normed for children from that culture. They're not culturally appropriate. There's a part of a test I would give where we do a pretend birthday party. What if you don't celebrate birthdays? Many cultures don't. So
Right.
we have to start really learning how to make things more culturally appropriate. And there's been a lot of studies that say that we overdiagnose autism and other developmental disabilities in certain populations, especially African American populations as well. So that's a place that we need to get better, I think, as a group of professionals that do assessment and provide services.
Yeah, in general too, everyone
Mhm.
needs to realize there's a bunch of aspects to everyone. Just
Yes.
calm down. Don't make judgments. Just realize that everyone's different. It's like the Somalian, I think it is. Aren't those the kids that they tried to put them into urban situations, and the other people of color didn't like them because their culture was so non-aggressive? Because when you
Mhm.
live in an urban environment, you're a pretty aggressive person to kind of survive. But the Somalians are like super calm and sweet. I think it's Somalian. Is that the ones that with the whole basketball thing that happened with they were extremely tall and they brought a bunch of them here or something. I'm just picking stuff out of my brain right now. But they
I'm
took them and
like,
put them.
what are you talking about?
Talking about
Yeah. Hey, hey, it's a
Do you
fun
know
ride.
Hope? I'm like, what is
Well, so is it? But like, yeah, I think it was. Could be getting Somalian wrong, but there was a group of kids that were coming from another country, and they put them in certain environments, and then they actually end up finding that Vermont was a better place for them because of their culture, basically. They weren't getting along with the kids in the urban parts of the cities.
That kind of makes sense. There's also very large Somali community in Minnesota as well,
Hmm.
which is very interesting. And
I
like,
did know that because I interviewed a clinician from Minnesota recently when they
oh,
were
did you?
talking about that, and I was like, huh, there's
Yeah.
another one that I would not have known. It's very
Mm.
interesting.
And maybe the
Yeah.
cultures fit better.
Because I was
I
talking
know that.
about
There's a lag.
I sort of my because my internet connection is it better? Or
Not
it's
yet.
uh should I just wait a minute?
You're like Max Headroom right now. If anyone remembers what that is.
I do.
Okay.
I don't know
Really?
what that is.
I still don't know how old you are.
What
So
is it?
you're generate. It's a in the
Yeah, and I'll
80s.
never tell.
There's in the 80s there was this digital character that became very famous, and his frame rate was like 10 instead of like the normal 23 to 30 to 60. And so it looked like a slideshow, and that was part of the character. That's what you're doing.
Uh,
I'd say you're at
TV
7 frames a
character?
second. Yeah, it was like a character on TV. Yeah,
Hmm.
basically. Yeah, he'd have to be because he wasn't a computer because they didn't have that technology, but it was a guy,
Yeah, I was like, wait.
and they changed
Yeah.
the color and shot him at like 10 frames a second or something like that. But yeah,
You'll
that's
have
what you're
you'll
doing.
have to go check that out because and look it up online. I think you'll think it's a little creepy.
It is creepy.
I'm sure Jayson will send a
That's what I
YouTube
was just
video
gonna
of
say.
it
I'm gonna
as
send you a
soon as we
link.
get off,
That's right.
and I will watch it.
I.
Oh man,
always-
now I lost what I was going. Oh, I know. It's like, so I'm gonna guess at the whole population thing, like versus like putting somebody in the middle of the city,
Mhm.
and my guess would be in these like more spread out areas, people can kind of make their own little micro community and not be inundated, I guess, so much with American culture. So that would be sort of my guess as to why maybe like in Vermont and Minnesota, there are areas where they can have a micro community and not be like thrown into the middle of the inner city, which is a whole nother atmosphere if you're not used to American culture.
I agree, especially Rena in Vermont, because that's exactly what has happened. They have this community in the two areas within Burlington and Winooski and they are a very family-oriented communal culture. And so being able to all live together and everybody takes care of everybody else's child. So we want to live all in a same like apartment complex and community and things like that. So because I think there is that availability in Vermont, it's been very supportive for these groups.
Yeah. I think that's similar with a lot of different cultures that come here, from there's just other cultures just seem more about community than people that we are in the US. And I mean, even in my building, there are generations and they're Russian immigrants, either from Russia and Ukraine, and they're like generations of people that have been in the same building, a mother, a grandmother, and a son, and and people kind of live in these buildings sort of like that, and so that they don't have to be broken up, but it's that same type of thing. And it does seem so different from what we've been socialized in the US is, people just be at that proximity to family.
Yeah. It's definitely different from the kind of our American way. So yeah, it's really
Rena,
interesting.
Can you shut your camera off for a second and turn it back on? I mean, in Zoom. That might.
Yeah, let me see.
Just stop video and then put it back. I think it might work. Now you're going to be on the bottom. I'll move you.
Any better?
Maybe.
I got a notification that my internet was unstable, so.
Is it raining? Probably not.
No. What are you talking about?
Rain
here.
My neighborhood has weird internet happenings. Like sometimes they'll just be like, "Oh, Spectrum's totally down," and you're like,
"Yes,
why?"
You would never think in LA. Ever since I've lived here, I'm just like, "What is going on?" And then I'll be driving through the city, and all of a sudden, I have no maps to use. I don't have any access. Like it's unusual. So
yeah.
It's the infrastructure's not there. Too many people. That's why I asked if it was raining, because whenever it rains in Vermont, the internet slows down because everybody goes inside.
Oh.
Yeah. I had a question about ABA.
Okay.
What do you think about it now? I know that when Luke was when I was just toying with the idea of getting him evaluated and stuff, I looked at everything, and ABA was one of them. And then there are different kinds of ABA. Some people are a little more aggressive with ABA, which I didn't like very much. And then there was like a different kind of ABA, it seemed. And now I've been reading and listening to things that where people are like, well, maybe that's not quite the way to go, because it's not really in line with the whole see what your child is doing and interact with them. It's actually it seems like it's trying to force them to change. And I think that I never really set well with me.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
You know, I've come a long ways when it comes to ABA, and I think what's happened is that the term ABA, which is an umbrella term for many different forms of teaching, has come to represent only one thing. And there are forms of what are called that are ABA supports, interventions, that are more developmentally focused. And especially for young children, we found that something like the Early Start Denver model, which is a form of ABA, a form of teaching, supports children learning social communication and interaction. And so there can be a lot of positives in some forms of ABA teaching. In the past, and where ABA started, was a form of ABA that is now called discrete trial teaching, or DTT or DTI, discrete trial intervention. And that is a highly structured program focused on teaching all kinds of skills across the spectrum of development, but is not always focused developmentally. So there may be teaching of certain skills before foundational skills are in place, if that makes sense. So it's not really focused on what typical development is. And most autistic individuals have some level of needing to walk through the levels of development. They're behind, right, in the development of certain skills. Some may have certain specific strengths, and others that they may be challenged with. Even skills of daily living that we need to learn, like how to dress yourself. And so some of these things I think can be taught in sort of an ABA fashion, but some of the discrete trial type teaching, where we get young children sitting in a chair, responding to the adult. And I think, Jayson, this is what you're speaking to, does not accept them as the human being that has wants and needs and interests. And we just need to help them unlock those and how to communicate them. That's a very different way, right? And I think what I've heard from many, from reports from individuals now that are adults that had gone through that form of ABA, they felt like it was basically kind of infantilizing to them. They actually knew and understood a lot more. It was more about how to unlock that, not about teaching them the skill. So here we are teaching skills that they may already know how to do. The motivation's not there. There's some other reason why they can't show the skill, right? And so I know that many ABA professionals are trained and can be very helpful sometimes when children are having specific behaviors that could be hurting others or hurting themselves, and ways to help walk through that. I think the key in ABA, if it is a system issues, and this is up to, the unfortunate piece is that this is often starting in childhood. And that's where a lot of the self-advocates have problems, is that these are children that, one, are already struggling to communicate, and they aren't able to tell you, is this something I want for me, for my life? They're not able to tell you that. And so, I think this is just an evolving situation. I think that if there are ABA professionals, that we all work together as a team, because exactly like what you said, Jayson, the things that I was teaching you in the Hannah More Than Words program may have gone against what they may have been teaching in a different setting with ABA principles. Is that
Yeah.
make
Y-
sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It's very similar to showing a child. I don't want to sound negative, but like showing a like I feel like a child that receives love and trust and safety will prosper more than one that is fearful and frustrated. So depending on where your child is in the spectrum, I feel like your job is to make them feel good as and happy with what they're doing. And so maybe if they're sure someday you'd like them to use a fork, but if it causes them if you're doing some kind of thing like ABA, actually before I go there, could you explain what ABA is to someone that doesn't know what it is?
Yeah. I was going to ask you that because people watching might
Yeah.
have no
May
idea
not know.
what that is.
Yeah.
So applied behavioral analysis, ABA, is kind of an umbrella term for interventions that have been used in different populations, not only for autistics, but for even for individuals who may have intellectual disability, to teach them discrete skills. So that could be learning how to brush your teeth, learning how to wash your hands. It could be learning how to sort shapes. It could be learning how to use a word to communicate. And it goes across all kinds of life skills, both academic and life skills. And so it's a way of using repetition, pretty significant repetition, as well as reinforcements for appropriate responses. So most ABA is focused on the response. What is the outcome? I want them to do X. I'm going to show them how to do it, and then I'm going to expect them to do it, and then I'm going to reinforce that behavior. So pretty much all of ABA is looking at the discrete skills that you're teaching and the behaviors and the outcomes, right, in the child. That's what ABA is. How we go about using ABA principles may look different depending on the type of or form of applied behavioral analysis that's being used.
Yes.
Is that clear as mud?
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
Okay.
And so what I was going to say was like Luke can use a fork. He's perfectly good at it. If I'm standing next to him. And if I put my hand on his left left hand, he'll eat with a fork like no problem. As soon as I walk about 2 feet away, he's looking right at me using his hand again. Like I don't really judge him. I think that's actually easier to use your hands, but I don't reprimand him for it. I just go back over. I reprimand. You can't reprimand that kid. It's impossible. He's just sweetie.
Oh my gosh.
You just go over and I just put my hand back on his hand, you know, and all I have to do is touch it, and he'll keep going. But with ABA, should be the idea would be to actually make it somewhat annoying to them, or not. It's the worst way to put it. Like, you're doing something wrong. Like, give them the feeling that they're doing something wrong, right? Is that the idea? With like, how would you teach fork instead of hand with ABA?
Right. So I don't think the intent, we have to take out, and this is what I think is the issue, the intent of what the person is doing that's implementing ABA versus what the procedures are. I don't think the intent is negative. But in the history of ABA, there were negatives. So when Skinner developed this type of intervention, aversives were used. Sometimes shock, things that we would never think, were anywhere close to appropriate, or averting your eye gaze from someone when they do it the wrong way to send a message that was wrong. So, but we've shifted a long way from that, and that is not how things are done with ABA any longer. But with ABA, what you might see is some kind of directive use your fork, or let's eat. And if they're not using the fork, they may put their hand around the fork, and they may take the fork and move it to their mouth and put it down and say, good job, and then reinforce them. You may see something like that.
Yeah.
It may not be that structured, but that's kind of like a discrete trial. That's a trial. And then there's data taken. And then we do it again until we start to pull away all of those supports that we have in hopes that they would do it on their own.
Okay. Yeah. You slowly pull away the supports. Like, like you don't just abandon, because then, yeah. Like maybe like if you put your hand, if you're doing hand over hand with them, you might just grab their elbow.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. God, all that's coming back to me now.
Yeah. And in some ways, what you're doing for Luke by touching his hand is giving him a little bit of a prompt. Oh, it's time to use your fork.
Yeah.
I mean, you are kind of doing that, giving him support.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, he knows too, because when he's eating with his hand, he looks at me. He's watching me the whole time. Like, it's like a mischievous thing almost. It's really cute.
And how old is he now?
He turned 5 in April.
Well, he is 5. And that's the thing we have to remember too. And I tell families all the time.
That's so true.
Some of the things that autistic kids do are what every other kid does.
Yeah.
So there's also, I feel like sometimes we have expectations that are inappropriate, especially when I see a 2-year-old. I'm like, you have to remember they're 2.
That's what you said to me when he was 3. You said, you have to remember he's also 3. And I was like, right. Like, he's not writing emails yet.
No, he's a 3-year-old. And 3-year-olds do things and that they're not supposed to, and look at you like, did you see me? Yeah. I mean, a lot of these are fairly typical behaviors of children in their age range. So
yeah, that was great when you said that to me. It really it set me on a right path, because I was like just giving him, had expectations, or I was just designing like a path for someone that wasn't 3.
Right.
I was just like, wait a minute, and I was like, oh yeah, he's 3. Maybe he doesn't want to go to bed.
That's pretty normal.
Yeah. Wow, that's yeah.
Maybe he likes eating with your hand on his hand.
Yeah.
Maybe he
could be. It could.
Or maybe
he
just Or maybe he's just like, wait a minute, if I know that if I do this, Dad is going to do this.
Right.
And then he's just like,
he definitely
let me try it again. Maybe he's doing the same thing you're doing. You're like, okay, when I put my hand on his hand, then he's going to use his fork. And he's like, when I
eat with
when
my
Dad
hand.
goes away. Yes.
Maybe he's just like, I really like eating with you next to me. And it only happens when, when I eat with my hand.
He's training you, Jayson.
He totally is. He's trained me in a lot of ways, and I have to remember it often, because I like I said, mix things up. Yeah, that kid never knows what's going to happen.
You're preparing him for life well.
That's right.
We don't know what's going to happen, especially today.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
So I know you have a hard stop, and we're like 15 minutes away. So I just wanted to kind of let you know so we can get to some stuff. I do want to get to some life stuff about you, like, because we talked a lot about your work and about autism. So you've lived in a lot of different places, it seems. Where did you start, and do you have a favorite place that you've lived or spent time?
Oh gosh, I grew up in Virginia, and small town outside of DC, and I ended up doing my undergraduate work at Old Dominion University, which is in Norfolk, Virginia, and then ended up moving up to Maryland. And out of every place I've lived, there's so many wonderful things that I've enjoyed about being there. There's something special and still to this day in my heart about Baltimore. I loved they call it Charm City for a reason. There's just something different about that city. It's a small city. I loved the people. I loved how there was like kind of this gritty quality to Baltimore. Lots of underground arts that you really had to live there and be a part of the community to know about, that I got to engage in. And so I loved living in that city. And then it's hard living in that city. It's hard seeing what happens in that city, and me actually doing work in, you know, in homes in the middle of Baltimore City, you know. So it's this, I don't know, I just really have this fondness for Baltimore, and I always will. And then, you know, my husband is from Western Massachusetts, so he wanted to move to New England, and so that was such a shift for me. I was like, oh, am I going to be able to handle this? And I moved to Vermont. Super different. New England's so different than the South, but I came to find this amazing community, really progressive, beautiful, bucolic place to live, and just really wonderful people. And you know, the University of Vermont was such a supportive place for me, and amazing mentors, and has sent me really on my path for the rest of my career. And I was there for 11 years and absolutely loved it. I think for me, we were ready for something different. It's long, cold winters in Vermont. There's no way around it. 11 years of long, 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 cold winters. And many people do make this decision after some time in Vermont to say, I'm flying the coop here and I'm going somewhere warm, you know. And so that's kind of was our move out here. And LA was not on the agenda at all. It just happened to fall into place for my husband to get a job here. And we live at the beach. And I mean, what can I say? Love it.
Huge difference from long, cold winters. I couldn't even hack the winters in Baltimore and DC. I was like, nope, can't take it anymore. So then I came here. I cannot
just stay inside.
Imagine.
That's all you do.
But I like to go outside.
And it's dark all the time in the winter.
I don't even have a window. I love that. That's I love Vermont. I love being stuck inside. To me, it's like some kind of weird like survival thing. I adore it. But I hear what you guys say all the time.
Wow.
And I got vitamin D. I take vitamin D supplements.
Well, you need to there.
Yeah,
so I've kind of, you know, I've loved everywhere I've lived actually for many different reasons. And I got my start in my field of choice and especially working with autistics and their families in Baltimore. So that's, I got a lot of my training there, and so, you know, I've loved everywhere I lived. But I'm not, it's just, it was just happenstance that we came to LA, and I've so enjoyed it. You know, we're talking about the support of different cultures and having their own communities. It's just so wonderful to be in a city that's like that, you know?
What I like about being out here is like, you've got these different communities and they're like to an extent kind of in their own little corners, but then they're also like, you have to mingle with everybody. And that's what I like about it, is like everybody's got to go to the grocery store together. So even if you live, you know, in these certain areas, there's a lot more cultural mixing out here that I think really helps. So I always compare people to dog. I got a puppy like 5 years ago and then took a deep dive into dog psychology and puppy kindergarten and everything. And I was like, you know, it's not unlike how we should be dealing with people, right? Like, because you've got to you've got to like take the puppy to puppy kindergarten so they get socialized with the other puppies, and all the puppies of different sizes and different temperaments. And so they've got to learn, like, I shouldn't just go bite the other puppy on the neck. Like, that's not a good thing to do. Right. And so I'm like, people don't get socialized enough, right? Like, to all different cultures and just ways of being and neurodiverse and everything. Like, people are too stuck in whatever, you know, right? And I think that affects the way that you relate to others and see the world. And, you know, like what you were talking about, Jayson, with Mila, is like, because she's been around. She's probably been exposed. So she's maybe been better socialized, right? Like than like maybe we have when we were, younger. And I really think like the puppy kindergarten thing, you just got to socialize everybody and expose them to each other. And then they learn how to play together. And then, it'll be better. But you usually have to do it when they're kids before they form those adult biases.
True. Yeah, it's very true. I love the puppy kindergarten thinking. It's great.
Yeah, really it can be like something you tell someone that's being stuck in their ways. Like, does someone need to go to puppy kindergarten?
Yes. I like that.
You're going to see that. I'm going to post that on Facebook sometime when I'm arguing with someone. Like, looks like someone needs to go to puppy kindergarten.
That's fun. And only I will know and Hope will know what you're talking
about. Oh, yeah.
Right.
It does sound kind of derogatory, though. But oh, awesome. Cool. Should I ask her the question?
Yeah, go ahead and ask the question.
Okay. I pretty much ask everybody this.
Okay.
I don't think I've missed anyone yet, but it doesn't matter. It's a hypothetical question. It's kind of fantastic, and it's yeah, I'll just do it. So you're sitting where you are right now, and through the door, someone comes in and they look exactly like you. They're disheveled. They might have a bruise or two, or something's wrong, definitely. And looks exactly like you. Goes up to you and says, "Come with me right now. I'm from the future." What do you do?
Wow. This is on the heels. I'm watching this great series on Amazon Prime called Paper Girls. If you haven't seen it, it's like Goonies, but girls. And there's time travel.
Oh,
it is
nice.
The best. So much fun. Absolutely lovely.
Paper Girls.
Paper Girls. And the lead roles are really both the young girl and the older girl. They're different, they are each other, but at different ages are Asian. So the lead role, so it's really, really wonderful. So that I've been in this mindset about like, what would happen if I was moving into the future and I actually met myself, I think I'd go. I think I'd go also because if they're bruised and disheveled and, is there something I could do to help?
I don't know.
Or to not have that fate, I guess.
Yeah, to intervene. Yeah, exactly. To intervene. That's such a good question.
It does bring up the moral aspect of do you have the right to change the timeline for other people, though?
Right. And that's, a part of the show is a lot of that, about what are we changing and what can we change and what we can't change.
Right.
And from seeing your older self and saying, I want to fix that so it doesn't happen. And the older self saying, this is what I needed to go through and work through, right?
But you might be causing someone else turmoil that you didn't. Of course, they wouldn't have known, and neither would you. But you might be.
I don't know. I mean, my immediate inclination is I want to go.
Me too.
But then I stop and think about it, and I think about it from those perspectives, and maybe
you just say no to yourself.
It's not the right thing.
You know what? This is really weird and all, and it makes sense that I would go. I want to, but no. Rena would have a bunch of questions for herself.
Yeah, I said I was gonna. I needed to ask several questions, and then I think you said, Jayson, that like whatever my future self was like, I already know that you're gonna ask me these questions, so she would be prepared.
Yep, and then you would be like, I figured that you would know. So I prepared questions you might not know. Well, I knew you were going to do that. So
yeah, that might go on for a while.
Yeah,
to the point that you may never go.
That's right. Yeah,
we might be at a stalemate.
Thing.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I love that question.
Yeah, it helps to get to know people. It's a great way to break ice if you don't know someone too. Of course, then they think you're weird, but yeah,
I don't think so. It's provocative. Think about it.
Yeah.
I like it. He's asked everybody, so it's interesting to see all of the different approaches that people take with the question.
And I think my initial response is just who I am. You know, I
Mm.
jump into a helper role.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what, that was the first thing that I cued in on. Like,
Yeah.
looks like they're in need of help, and then
Yeah.
that's
Mm.
It didn't
how
necessarily
went.
need to be you. It could have been someone just needed help. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I figured. Plus,
Yeah.
you seem kind of adventurous. You're always traveling and stuff. So I got that feeling that you just be like, yeah,
Let's go.
what are we doing? What are we doing?
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. It's right. I can't. Wow, we're like timely now. We're like a well-oiled machine. 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow. I know. I was going to say, this is perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, Rena's go eat too.
Yes, I do. I'm actually surprised the cat has not interrupted because usually
Oh.
he shows up at about the 2-hour mark
Yeah, you can
in
get a Charlie
the
visit.
show.
Or sorry, Oliver.
Yeah, he's
Oliver. Aw.
he is passed out sleeping on the dog's bed, just really nicely.
And
Very
if you
good.
follow her Instagram, you'll be able to see them recycle together.
Oh,
on
okay.
that's on TikTok,
Oh,
actually.
TikTok,
Yeah,
sorry.
it's Charlie with Oliver on TikTok. And
Okay.
They recycle.
Oh,
Yeah, it's insane.
so great.
Wow, thank you so much. This has been great. It's been a long time coming too. I think you were going to be our 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th, and it just kept
I
going.
know.
And then we got busy, so then I was like, I'm just going to give her a break because I don't have time to figure out if she's going to be coming on. And then when it slowed down, I was like, all right, now I'm going to reach out. But you were always so cool about it, so I thank you so much.
Yeah. No, I know. And I've been in this like shift because I just started my new position July 1, and then I hit the ground running. So yeah, it's been a bit of a wacky couple months. So I appreciate you being willing
Oh,
to
God.
be flexible. And
I just kept on saying, there's no pressure. It's whenever. You could be
Yeah.
anytime. Because it's true. There's no pressure. That's what I like about it.
yeah. I'm so glad you're doing this. This has been really enjoyable.
Thank you. For me too.
yeah, thank you so much for joining. And now we should do the thing that we often forget to do, Jayson.
Oh,
which
yes.
is,
Don't forget
please,
to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Now we try to do it the same. Please like and subscribe.
Oh, and share and comment and go to Patreon.
Yes, and do all the things because we are a very, very new show starting out. So every little bit, comment, like, share, subscribe. That that all
and
helps
also,
us out.
I'm assuming no, but Hope, do you want anyone to contact you, or do you have any links you want to give out or anything, or even some information, the links or something?
Yeah, I mean, I can send you a few things that I think would be
Okay.
supportive.
I'll put it in
especially
description.
some sites that are really neurodiversity affirming websites for
Nice.
parents and for autistics. So I have some things that I can forward to you.
Oh, fantastic. I'll put it in the description, and if you want to highlight one in particular that's good, I can put it along the bottom when I
Okay.
edit.
Perfect. I'll do that.
Cool. All right, well, have fun eating.
Yes.
All right.
You gotta have a good night. It's so good to see you, Jayson.
Good to see you too.
Okay.
Talk to you
night.
soon.
Give a big
See you on
hug to Luke
Facebook.
for me.
I will. I will.
Take care. Bye,
Bye.
Rena. So nice to meet you.
Bye. You too.
Bye bye.